team opposition largely loses this debate is on the fact when they come here and they defend that, you know what, we would rather keep a status quo where the Labour Acts are still existent. But why doesn't that play out on their favour? Because our side of the house does not dictate that we are removing the Labour laws at the end of the day. We dictate that we are actually giving people some type of opportunity, some type of stage to negotiate the rigidity of the Labour laws that stands in the way of employment, which they largely lose on their side of the house. Now, before let me go into the engagements, let's take a look at their counterfactual. When their first opposer comes here and gives us a criteria of that, you know what, we support something that aids unemployment. Why doesn't this play out on their side of the counterfactual? What their counterfactual is maintaining status quo. Now, this debate wouldn't even come up if the counterfactual was already standard in its own way. Now, why this doesn't play out is one, if they're trying to maintain a status quo, we'll work on the structural differences, we'll work on the skills. This still doesn't play out because youth still lack some type of opportunity at the end of the day to share those skills, to actually take place and actually work on themselves at the end of the day. Therefore, they lose largely on this. Another thing they actually bring out is that, you know what, we'd rather support status quo where the harms outweighs the benefits. Now, what does status quo look like? Status quo looks like, you know what, people are actually having these structural differences fixed. People are actually having these skills actually, but they do not have the portrayal of where to actually elaborate what they're going to look like, where they're actually going to put some type of ability. Now, let us start with, take it back to the premise of this debate, the youth. What does the youth look like? We said when the youth want some type of employment, there's a certain heavy criteria that they have to actually adjust to. One, what does this look like? Experience. Why doesn't this largely play out on their side of the house? Is that even when they talk about the structural differences being fixed, even when they talk about things like skills being given to the people, this does not play out because the youth are still going to have some type of stereotype that needs them to have some type of high experience, which they cannot even get with the rigid labor laws. Therefore, they largely lose on this. Now, let's take a look at the engagements to our case. One, what they mainly rotate around is exploitation. Now, this does not come to play at the end of the day because they're actually trying to bring in a fact that, you know what, our side of the house looks like we are trying to remove the labor laws, but one type of clarity we need to understand in this debate is that exploitation does not play out because we are actually looking at giving these youth unemployment opportunity certificates to youth who are actually unemployed at the end of the day. Now, we feel like on our side of the house, we would rather someone who is able to adjust these labor laws in order to have some type of perhaps short period of working time in order to get some type of experience or to get some type of gig employment, which will be sustainable in itself, therefore giving them a stage in order to be employed. Yes, Theo.
In developing countries, governments make considerations for people. For example, here in South Africa, the minimum wage is 20 rand. Why should we decrease this instead of doing things like subsidizing companies to reduce the amount of wages they have to pay? Why should we make the minimum wage, which is 20 rand, lower instead of subsidizing companies and having them pay less wages?
Now, we feel like on our side of the house, we would rather negotiate this minimum wage in order to give people first a human capital. What does this human capital look like? Experience. We would rather someone who has been unemployed at the end of the day, getting some type of stake in order to show their potential, in order to get some type of opportunity at the end of the day, where they can actually get this type of sustainable experience that can take them to even more jobs later on in the end of the day. Because at the end of the day, the premise is the root. Now, let's take a look at the engagement on our case. First, they talk about, you know what, if we let this issuing of youth employment opportunity certificates come out, we will have the social contract being disobeyed. Now, why doesn't this play out on their favor at the end of the day? We feel like if the government already is the one who's having the initiative to give out these youth employment opportunity certificates, the social contract is still maintained and it is very better. Because at the end of the day, these people, not everyone fits into the Labour Act because not each and every single person was there when they were talking about the Labour Act. But we feel like on our side, social contract is most given out because people are actually given some type of stage at the end of the day to get some type of employment. Now, another engagement we get from the side of the house is that these youth employment opportunity certificates give some type of short-term sustainability. Now, why doesn't this still play out on their favor? We feel like when they come here and they talk about that, it does not give sustainability because it's a temporary solution. Now, one thing we need to understand is that we do not need some type of perhaps skill set because we see that current status quo dictates that some youth still have skills and why are they still employed? They need some type of opportunity. They need some type of chance, some type of potential to show off what they actually have. Now, why does this play out as sustainability on our side of the house? We feel like on our side of the house, if these employment opportunity certificates are given out at the end of the day, these people can be able to negotiate that rigid labor laws in order to get something that can favor both the employer and the employee in order to get some type of potential, some type of stage, which they did not engage in from the beginning of their debate. Now let's take a look at the clashes in this debate. 1, is it sustainable? 2, is it effective? Now let me first start with, is it effective? They come here and they downplay the fact that, you know what, when we actually issue these youth employment opportunity certificates, they won't be effective on itself. Now, what their counterfactual actually dictates is that we should maintain status quo. Chair, let's weigh that up. What does status quo look like? Status quo looks like a country like South Africa, which is actually being dictated as one of the most developed countries in Africa, having industries and stuff. Now, why does this youth employment opportunity certificate be a necessity in such a country? We feel like it gives this type of people who are in this country some type of stage in order to show off their effectivity at the end of the day. Now, we feel like even when they try to downplay a world where like these structural differences have been fixed, what will this then look like? We feel like on their side of the house, these things like industries and the job opportunities will be given to some people like expatriates who already fit into what the employees want at the end of the day. Therefore, on the side of effectivity, we feel like we win this clash point. Another clash point we see is that, is it sustainable? Now, why doesn't this play on their side of the house? We feel like it is more sustainable on their side of the house because we would rather have someone who's going to have some type of skill set, fit into different types of criteria at the end of the day, hence giving them a long-term solution to unemployment, hence fitting into their first criteria of would support something that aids unemployment. Now, let's weigh up this debate. Who best solves unemployment at the end of the day? When team opposition shoots themselves in the foot, is that when they say that their counterfactual is maintaining status quo. Why doesn't this play out? We are actually looking at the problem being unemployment, but let me first run you a problem analysis. We see that even in a world where structural differences are catered for, even in a world where skills are given to people, why does unemployment still exist at the end of the day? We feel like unemployment would still exist if these people are not given some type of opportunity, if these people are not given some type of stage. Therefore, these youth employment opportunity certificates cater for that at the end of the day, hence we win on that question. Now, on their side of the house, let's weigh it up using the matrix. What is the impact of their counterfactual? We feel like if we actually keep their counterfactual, there will be more and more skilled people who do not actually have the opportunity, who do not have the entry fee, like at the end of the day, therefore keeping their side of the house more unemployed. On our side of the house, we feel like we would rather have people who have some type of opportunity to portray their skills and therefore even keeping them sustainable at the end of the day, therefore win on that. Thank you.
We thank that speaker for his speech. I would like to open the house.
I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. We think that within today's debate, we have to protect the most vulnerable actor. It's important to note that the way in which these minimum wages and these labor laws currently exist is that they are at their minimum. This is to say that minimum wage is as low as it can get because we're in an area of high unemployment. That is to say that in an area of high unemployment, we've noticed this problem, tried to mitigate it to the best way possible, and that has led to this minimum. We think that when you don't engage with the fact that you're going and decreasing beyond this minimum, you cannot win based off of that metric within today's debate. You're running away from your burden. Here then, we think that it's very important to have genuine engagement with our counterfactual. But before I get into that, let me just show you our humble concession which they're able to make. Strategically, they're flawed. What do they tell us? And we think that them conceding to the fact that the characters and the vulnerable actors within today's debate are able to be desperate is extremely harmful. Why? We think that it's extremely harmful because they don't show why these vulnerable actors which are desperate, which don't have basic needs, are still incentivized to protect themselves to the highest extent. We think that they don't show us how these incentives exist in terms of protection, not only of my rights, but protection of the type of experience that I get, protection of the future which I'm able to get within these workspaces. We think that when that is something that not able to happen, they cannot win this debate. On our side, we tell you incentives exist, if not only by these individual people which are desperate by these labor laws. It's important to note that when you negotiate, you go outside of these labor laws. They're not able to protect you, firstly. But secondly, we think that there's a culture that is created to decrease use of these labor laws, but number two, decrease the way in which companies within themselves engage with these labor laws. Here then, our criteria, let me remind you, because I'll be referring back to it within my rebuttal, showing how they don't meet this criteria. Firstly, we told you within our criteria that we think that this is harmful when the harms outweigh the benefits towards our main vulnerable actor. Secondly, we've told you that we think that they cannot win this debate when they're not able to change these systems and provide long-term aid. Within this, we think that let's look at our counterfactual and how that within itself works. We say that our counterfactual is based on things such as tax breaks, based on things such as subsidies. Note here that the counterfactual are things that happen on the long term. This is to say that with these subsidies, they're not temporary. With that not being temporary, a person is able to be viewed as an asset or not something that like I can just get another person to constantly replace that person. We think that then there's a culture that is created for long-term benefit. Moreover, we think that on our side, what happens? Even if you don't get this long-term benefit that I just spoke about, you still have these labor laws that are there for that mere sense of protection. On our side, when you're still able to have these laws, you have that protection. With our counterfactual, I'm able to incentivize companies, number one, but secondly, I'm still able to protect the most vulnerable actor within today's debate. Responses that we got to our counterfactual are twofold. Onefold actually, that number one, we allow more skilled people to not be able to enter the job market. This is to say that our people are still not able to enter jobs. We think that the metric within today's debate shouldn't be how many people rather are able to enter the job market, but the way in which they're able to enter. This is to say that if you are able to hire 2 more people and pay them 1 rand per hour, compared to hiring 1 person, paying them 20 rand per hour, those 2 people are at an inherent consistent harm. We tell you that those 2 people are not able to sustain their basic needs. We say that those 2 people live like below the red line. We think that that's something that is so harming people. But moreover, you're harming majority of the people, and we think that that's something that's inherently harmful. Not only the people that engage in these certificates, but we think that you're still able to harm the people that don't engage, because you have a culture and a normalization that is created. Here then, we think that based off of this, the impact of me showing you how counterfactual works is that firstly, we're able to show how you're able to harm, we're able to show how you're able to have an inherent benefit on people that is able to be long-lasting within society. Secondly, you're able to show how you have a normalization of the upkeep of labor laws to be beneficial for people. Here again, I'll take a POI.
So do these labor laws apply to unemployed youth?
Labor laws apply to everyone. We think that if you want to engage within the industry and the workspace, these labor laws are there either way. If you don't engage and you're not able to, we think that they're still there for you in case you want to engage. We're able to protect those who want to necessarily go into who want to go into the industry because they are unemployed. Here again, we think that when we get into the clashes that we have within today's debate, the first clash and most important clash we think is on protection. How does protection happen? We think that on their side, they tell you that you're able We think that on their side, they tell you that you have engagement with these labor laws because there's still something that exists. Furthermore, we think that they tell you that when you have a sense of protection of like dignity, when you have these people which are unemployed being able to get jobs. We think that we've shown you many responses to this. Firstly, we told you that labor law engagement is likely to be decreased. We tell you it's likely to be decreased when people aren't incentivized to engage with that labor law because they have a way to get out of that engagement. We think that when people are able to take loopholes which come out as being more beneficial towards them and have that like perception, we think that they're likely to take that because of their desperation and vulnerability. The impact of this is to show you on both sides labor laws exist, but on our side you have more protection because you have more engagement within that law. But secondly, we think that that engagement is something that we inherently value because there are people actually understanding their rights and actually understanding the way in which they're able to protect them. But thirdly, we think that it's very important for us to tell you that even if you yourself aren't able to protect your own rights, you're able to go through things such as the CCMA and you're able to have external protection of those rights, and that's something that happens only when you still keep these rights and only when you have negotiating and bargaining power. Here then, let's go into the positive matter that we've told you under the clash of protection. We've told you, number one, that you have exploitation that is likely to take place. The impact of that exploitation is that you have exposure to exploitation of the youth. Secondly, we've told you the fact that when you don't have a sustainable solution, this exploitation is exploitation that exists on the long term, and we think that exploitation is not something that is inherently able to be solved because of the mechanism that is able to be used. Thirdly, we told you that the government within itself is not fulfilling the social contract. What do we mean about this? Firstly, we tell you that you're able to undermine the rights of these people are undermined, and the government is not put in a position to continue to protect those rights. Secondly, we think that you're able to violate this government's mandate, and bargaining power is something that doesn't exist anymore. The importance of winning that clash is because we're able to show you, number one, where we're able to protect, or we're better able to protect the vulnerable actor on our side, but secondly, we think that we're able to show you how on their side they have an exacerbated harm to this vulnerable actor. Criteria here then, we tell you when the harms outweigh the benefits, particularly on protection, we're able to win based off of the protection clash only. Next clash here then, employment. We think that this clash is something that's going to be extremely quick. They tell you that you need incentives to have this employability. Number one, we tell you that when these incentives exist, we agree with this, but when they exist to the detriment of the same people that you're trying to protect, we think that that is something that's inherently harmful. We're also able to tell you how you worsen this gate culture that already exists by having you worsen this gate culture on our side.
In 3, 2, 1. We need to understand how these negotiations happen. These negotiations give the companies, the employers, more bidding power than the employee. This means that the power imbalance is going to stay there for a really, really long time, and we don't think at a point which, number one, we weaken those labor laws, we're able to come back to that very existent harm which is able to progress within society. But beyond that, the incentives of companies. We think that companies are profit-driven. We think small businesses, medium businesses, large businesses, all of them want profit, meaning by any means possible are they able to accept the most amount of profit, they will do so. We don't think it's effective enough to just say, well, what if they don't do it? We don't want to give that possibility a chance, which is why we have labor laws there in the first place. Then I'll be going into some points that I'm responsible to us first before going into some clashes. Number one, on necessity. We don't think the response to our necessity, our point enough. I will tell you two things. Number one, the exploitation already exists within the world. We don't want to worsen. But beyond that, we already recognize the fact that we've already laid out the laws to the maximum minimum that we can do within society. Meaning two things. Number one, we've already recognized that there's already a problem going on with society as a government. But beyond recognizing that, we think it's necessary for us to be engaging with other incentives beyond trying to break down the main structure that is there for employees within society. Impact of that then is two things. Number one, we don't think we undermine the way that people are able to integrate within the workspace. But second of all, we don't actually want to create a culture where we allow people to be able to continuously break down these barriers. Mind you, if people are desperate, they'll continue to break down these barriers. They also admit to this too. We don't think any kind of benefit is able to sustain them in the long term. Second then is how a better off legitimate. We talk about the government social contract is violating because we think it's supposed to care for the people before anything else. Yes, profit matters, but before anything else, it's supposed to care for the working conditions. They were able to sustain themselves within society. And we think to do that, we're supposed to be engaged with our counterfactual, but beyond engaging with our counterfactual, we're able to engage within the way that they're able to interact with that, which we think labor laws are there in the first place. But lastly, we don't think that they're able to engage within our efficiency. We tell you about gig culture. If you want flexibility, we have that on our side. But beyond having that kind of flexibility that you want on your side, we have it with labor laws, meaning that you're able to interact with this kind of flexibility in the long-term run. But beyond interacting with them in the long-term run, it's able to develop in a much better way for the youth in terms of number one, being able to interact with tax incentives because now they want more people coming in within the flexibility. But beyond interacting with flexibility, you are still protected. There is no risk of you being exploited. Then on comparative between our cases, right? But firstly, on our worst case versus their best case, we think our worst case is that if you're unable to get a job or you're unable to get the best sustainable job within the world, what happens is two things. Number one, there is no risk of you being exploited. Meaning that the fair salary that you're busy working for in that moment is able to be given to you at its full capacity for you to be able to sustain yourself within that higher unsustainable rate. But more likely, their best case is then being able to number one, not have a company that exploits you, but two problems
and that you leave space for them to be able to like exploit you within the future because we're desperate for that kind of like condition within the first place. We don't think like leaving like a risk there within the first place is principally right. But secondly, on like the short term versus the long term, we think on the short term, what happens is that, like our short term, that we're able to have like consistent efforts at decreasing unemployment. This is our counterfactual in like comes in. We think at the point at which you need direct like incentives for the company. We tell you two things. You cannot control the way in which a company is able to integrate a person within that space. At the point at which we make you directly incentivize you directly to a track saying like involve a person within an internship, keep them for a long term for like 5 or 10 years. We think our counterfactual is better because we're able to engage with you on a sustainable platform, but beyond it being sustainable, you aren't trading off things like your labor laws within the first place. But practically, we think we're overall better than them because even if people stay within the same workforce for the same amount of years and they gain the same amount of money, the difference is on our side, you're still able to progress within labor laws and go within higher within like business, but beyond being able to go within higher, able to go within like you're able to like progress much faster at the point at which your salary is able to also increase effectively at the point at which they're not able to limit the amount of money you're able to get within the future. Why are we overall better within today's debate? Number one, we're able to prove to you like the burden was supposed to prove within today's debate. Why issuing this certificate is not something that we want and not something we support.
I would like to thank our reply speaker for the speech. I'd like them to welcome our proposition reply to give their speech. Together.
I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. So the question still stands. Who will the labor laws protect if no one is employed? What we need to see is that their best case scenario only greatly relies on the fact that someone is employed. If people are not employed, then the Labor Act is useless and it should not exist in the first place because who is going to need protection? No one. So what they rely on is minimum wage and how this we cannot go further than this. Notice that the people who make these policies are sitting at the comfort of their offices. You as a person who is on the street, you as a person who is suffering, only know the magnitude as to how much you can actually experience this kind of suffering. We think this person would probably, and the probability that this person would care more about an opportunity than the amount maybe that they should receive 1,000 rand, then is actually not on the side of the house. However, they do talk about things like, you know what, internship, and we're giving this for internship. We think this does not lie. However, I'll talk about the main clashes. The main clash in tonight's debate is exploitation, and we all agree to the fact that we are living in a capitalistic society. We think it is a mere claim that I think it's a mere claim that in an attempt to get profits, these people will then guarantee exploitation. We think that these countries care more about image because that is how they make money. We think these companies care more about keeping government tenders. That is why they would then be held accountable for the tax incentive we are giving them. We think these kinds of companies care more about their portrayal in society in order to remain then in business. We think that side of exploitation then cannot stand in a capitalistic world and it should be held as null and void. However, they do talk about things like protection. We have already highlighted that this does not take away the labor laws. We think what they think that we are trying to do in our side of the house is take away labor laws, people go work, no one is going to protect you. We think government then still has the mandate and the right to protect people, but what we are doing is actually making this negotiable. However, at the end of the day, what they do in the whole debate is that they debate the motion but neglect the info slide. The info slide dictates factors in the Labour Act that are then negotiable, things like minimum wage and working conditions. We think if a person is okay to work overtime in order to get a greater pay, we then think that is not bad because there is consent at the end of the day. But we'll take them at their best case scenario. What they say is that, you know what, you should work as an unemployed person without documentation. Why this is necessarily detrimental is that this person who is then employing you then actually can be like, you know what, if I'm paying you this kind of money at the end of the day and nothing really shows that you are just coming in and you don't have the kind of criteria I was looking for in this kind of country, they would then have more dictatorship and then say, you know what, I'm going to dictate how much you work, I'm going to dictate how many hours you work because you should be worth the money that I am actually paying for. We then think this becomes bad, but we think that the documentation becomes important because it provides further protection and gives us a way to follow up these kinds of people in this kind of category at the end of the day. We think this is quite important because it gives us a tracking basis for these people. Something that we spoke about, but they do neglect at the end of the day. We think if you're able to trade off protection we think if they are able to trade off protection for opportunity, then we think if you are meant to be protected from the circumstances that arise from that opportunity, the opportunity should exist at the end of the day. You need to notice that if it's an independent and dependent variable, the opportunity then lies greater than what they do speak of. However, I would like to tell side opposition that please join side proposition and let's end unemployment. Result.